Oh, snap. Can we talk about Chris Christie? Can we talk about... I want to talk about Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie. I want to talk about new polling data about the Republican primary that shocked the hell out of me. It grabbed me by the neck and shook me. I was gasping for air. This is from Emerson College, a very, very reliable, reputable pollster. One of the major pollsters that has released some new information about the New Hampshire 2024 primary. Now, the reason why we're getting data about New Hampshire specifically is New Hampshire is one of the first primary states. It's Iowa, New Hampshire. New Hampshire is one of the first. And DeSantis has faded in this New Hampshire poll. He is no longer in second place anymore against Trump. Does anyone want to guess who is in second place? Number one, Donald Trump, 49%. Number two, Chris Christie. Chris Christie, 9%. Of course, it's, you know, the 9 and 8% difference between him and Ron DeSantis is within the margin of error. I do want to make note of that. But the fact that this is even possible is absolutely hilarious. But, before we make any movements on this, now I'm going to say why I think this is happening in a moment. But I think the first reason why this is happening, before I say the broader reason why I think Chris Christie is getting more support than I and many other people expected, more support, honestly, than he might have gotten last time around when he ran for president in 2016. The first reason is this is a New Hampshire. And if anybody knows Northeastern Republicans, they're probably more the moderate Republicans. In fact, if you were to go through that list of like Republicans for Ukraine we were looking at, I bet a decent chunk of them are probably Northeastern Republicans. Because they're in states that are blue, and they're surrounded by people and are in communities that are probably full with a bunch of liberals. And so they've moderated their politics to a certain extent. Or maybe it's because they don't live in a bubble. And that's my theory, is that if you're a Republican who believes in Republican ideals, not because you got like told that Trump is you know, the new man who's going to challenge the deep state with QAnon behind him and whatever conspiracy theories, but you believe in Republican values, low taxes, limited government. I disagree with that. I disagree with the Republican Party's take on that, but you believe in that. You can still not live in a bubble. And if you don't live in a bubble, it's kind of hard to fall into the Trump cult. And so I think that might be part of it. But still, 49% for Trump. So even though it might be a little harder in a state where you're living in less of a bubble, it's still not impossible. Still not impossible. But why is it that Chris Christie has more support than anyone would have thought? People laughed at him when he first ran. I laughed at him a little bit, even if I was saying, look, I disagree with his values. I disagree with what he stands for. But I do want somebody in the Republican Party calling out this huckster, con man, anti-democratic criminal, Donald J. Trump. And Chris Christie believes in the peaceful transfer of power. Donald Trump doesn't believe in the peaceful transfer of power. And he's the only one in the Republican Party who's calling Donald Trump out on this. So I wish him success in his kamikaze campaign against Donald Trump. I was thinking about this the other day. I was actually imagining when I was thinking about Chris Christie and how to talk about him. And the best way to describe Chris Christie is, I think, like a Japanese kamikaze pilot. Japanese kamikaze. There we go. A Japanese kamikaze pilot. So the kamikaze, if you don't know, I mean, I think most people know, were these pilots in World War II during late war Japan that just rammed their planes into American ships because the defense had gotten so desperate. That, in my opinion, is Chris Christie's campaign. He's got on his uniform. He's got his sword. Instead of a picture of the emperor, maybe it's like Ronald Reagan, and he's yelling "Banzai" or Reaganomics. Who knows? As he charges his plane into the Trump aircraft carrier.
Subscription. Have you seen the 2008 debate talking about Russia, Ukraine between McCain and Obama?
I do remember that. And Obama's position on Ukraine after the fact is, I think, relatively a failure. And we'll talk about that in a second, but let me finish this segment because YouTube. But I picture Chris Christie as a kamikaze pilot ramming into Donald Trump's campaign, trying to show him as the con man that he is to as many people within the Republican Party as he can. I mean, is it possible that he could win? I mean, maybe in a 1 in a million chance, but it's probably not going to happen. But why? What? When I say kamikaze, like, can I give an example? I can give an example. Uh-oh. One second. It's still playing the desktop audio. One second. Let me lower that. There's an ad. I hate Mediaites ads very much. I hate any news site that does that, where it makes it impossible to mute the ads. Anyway, let me show you guys the example of him kamikazing into Trump's campaign on Fox and Friends. Oh, not at Fox and Friends, but on the Fox News channel. And the thing is about kamikazing his campaign is he doesn't even need to like go that out of the way to do it. He just needs to tell the truth. Watch this.
Himself, he said this political.
I don't have any volume on for me. Let me turn that up. See, that's why I hate it, because I lower my whatever. Okay, let me turn it back on.
That he gave to Fox News Digital last night. Let me read it to you. This is from President Trump himself. He said this politically inspired indictment, which could have been brought close to 3 years ago, was tailored for placement right smack in the middle of my political campaign where I am leading all Republicans. Is there something to that? That if she
nothing.
Could she have done this before? It's not.
There's nothing to it. Look, and if she had charged him 3 years ago, he would have said, what a rush to judgment. There's been no investigation. No one's looked into this. And now they're just charging me for political reasons. He wants to have his cake and eat it too. If in fact the charges had happened 3 years ago, he would have said there was no investigation, it's a rush to judgment. If they happened after a full investigation, he says, well, now it was time to work with the campaign. Look, running for president is his choice. No one else is making him do it. But it is not an excuse not for the justice system to continue to operate. And I think all of these judges in the end will make decisions based upon reasonable availability of all the witnesses and everyone else. And in the end, what Donald Trump has to deal with is, this is not a civil case. He's never been involved in criminal cases before. He's been involved in civil cases where you can just put it off and like, it's no big deal. Mm-hmm. He is out on bail in 3 different jurisdictions. Usually when you're charged, people are remanded and they stay in prison prior to the trial. He's been given released on all 3, and he'll be released confidently in the 4th one.
Can I just say about what he said earlier about Trump being charged? It's 100% true. There is no circumstance where Trump is charged with a crime, no matter how overwhelming the evidence, where he doesn't say that it's rigged or it's against him or it's some plot against. There is no scenario where that isn't the case. Just like there was no scenario where he loses the election and he doesn't claim it's rigged. He wrote his speech about the election being rigged 4 days before the election. He said on the campaign trail, if I lose, it's rigged. He was building that narrative for years. He can't accept a loss. He can't. Just like he can't accept him being charged or held responsible for the crimes that he committed while in office and while not in office.
I want to talk a little bit about your campaign and what's expected in a moment here, but just one more question on this. Everyone lit their hair on fire when that phone call was recorded on behalf of Raffensperger, right? It runs an hour and change. And the key line, I went back and listened to this morning, Trump says, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes. Now, he says repeatedly, in my opinion, this is what we should do, in my opinion, etc. If he's speaking his opinion.
Blue Rider of Neptune gave Remus_Croft a Tier 1 subscription. We have a Ukraine in site chat, and Ukraine chatter needs a Ukraine gold name.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for gifting a Tier 1 sub to a Ukraine chatter. We're getting a lot more of those. My community has a percentage of the Ukraine viewership I mean, obviously, since before I was ever talked about Ukraine, it's absolutely exploded. But I'm happy that I have a lot of Ukraine viewers from Ukraine, because I want people here who can call me out on my bullshit. If I ever say something that's just like completely false about the country, I want people who can be like, Dylan, no, that isn't true. I'm from here. I know that isn't true. I really prefer that, because I see so many conversations about Ukraine online where there's no Ukrainians in the room and someone says something that's like so obviously not true. Like, yeah, when Zelensky took over power in 2014 and there's no one in the room to call it out. So I like that. Not to mention, if Ukrainians are watching my content, it must be I'm saying something right about the country, I think.
Is there a crime in this conversation?
Well, look, I think that's what a jury is going to decide, Bill. What I would say to you is, when you listen to the entire conversation, his problem is that and you combine it with all the other conversations he's having with Brian Kemp, with other officials in the legislature and the leaders of the legislature. He was attempting to do everything he can to get that result and putting pressure on them.
And Alan Dershowitz argued last night that they were doing the same thing on behalf of Al Gore in Florida and in Palm Beach County in the year 2000.
Dude, I'm sorry. This argument makes no fucking sense. Al Gore pursued legal options. Then the court said, nah, you lose. And then he dropped it. People say the same thing about Hillary. Hillary considered legal options against certain states during the 2016 election. But you know what she did? She didn't even pursue it in the first place. She dropped it. But when Donald Trump went through the legal process and all the courts said, many of them Trump appointees, oh, you just this just has crayon scrawling on it saying I is president. No, you is not president. You lost. You don't have any evidence of fraud. They decided, even though they had lost the case, to continue to go through with the fake electors plot, to illegally access voting data and voting machines. The same thing that they were accusing the supposed fraudsters of doing. To do that call with Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, and trying to pressure him to overturn the election, giving him the exact amount of votes necessary to overturn the election, saying that exact number, and saying, if you don't do anything about this, is going to be very bad for you. Because he's saying, oh, he's just giving his opinion. He wasn't just giving his opinion. And that same phone call, Donald Trump saying, man, this is very illegal. You're going to have consequences if you don't do anything. And what has his relationship been with Brad Raffensperger since then? Oh, he's a schmuck. He's terrible. He even endorsed his primary opponent since then. He's trying to deliver upon those repercussions, showing that if you don't fall in line and give Trump what he wants when he wants it, there will be repercussions. So no, it's not like Al Gore, and it isn't like Hillary. There's nothing like this has ever happened before.
Except when Al Gore lost his legal challenges.
True, and Chris Christie's about to say it. By the way, that's another thing. When people say, and I see this all the time, nothing like this, a president being charged like this has never happened in our country's history. Well, what Trump did has also never happened in this country's history. We've never had somebody try to use electors like he did. Fake electors, mind you. We've never had them. Oh, well, we lost our cases. Guess we're just going to push this fake slate of electors and file just completely fraudulent documents, lie about it. Let's do that. That'll work. That's never happened before. Let's write up executive orders to seize voting machines using soldiers. Never happened before. Never.
Conceded the election. Al Gore took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court. He availed himself of all the legal challenges, Bill. And then when the courts were done, Al Gore said, I still don't agree with it, but the courts are done. I'm backing off. Donald Trump has been much different. And I said this to the president in December of 2020, the last time he and I spoke. I said, you've availed yourself of the courts. There's nothing left. You need to concede the election. And he said, I will never, ever, ever admit it. Well, look, if you're going to continue to use the power of the presidency, which he was doing, to put pressure on people, you're going to put yourself in a very dangerous circumstance. And let's take it aside for a second from the criminal. We can't normalize this conduct. I mean, this has never happened before in this country, ever, where you had a candidate for president of the United States conduct himself in this way, to disrespect the election process in this way, to refuse to accept the verdict of the voters. And
you know how far it feels like we've fallen when I'm like praising Chris Christie, like, hey, Chris Christie doesn't want to end democracy. Isn't that cool, guys? I hope he wins the Republican primary. I hope the Republicans pick the guy who respects our democratic institutions and the peaceful transfer of power.
What does it say about his judgment, guys? What does it say about whether or not he's fit to sit behind that desk? Is this really, and by the way, here we are this morning, and I understand why we're doing this, and I'm happy to talk about it because of my background.
Yep.
But we're not talking about what Joe Biden's doing to this country. We're not talking about the porous border. We're not talking about the fact that health care is a mess, right?
That the Trump people would say that the indictments were by design to prevent them from being able.
By the way, a Chris Christie healthcare policy is a terrifying prospect.
To let him do that, but
Dana, he's made the choice for the last 2.5 years. This is what he's been talking about. He has spent most of his time before he was ever charged with anything. All he's been talking about is that the election was stolen. When he was on another show on this network with Brett.
I mean, that's true. If anything, in a way, this is a gift because he has now a justification to talk about the thing he's been blabbering on about for the last 2.5 years.
Bear a month or so ago, and Brett asked him, how are you going to get people who didn't vote for you in 2020, especially suburban women, to vote for you in 2024? And he said, well, I didn't lose in 2020. I mean, that's before he was charged with anything.
That's true. And yet, so we have the New York Times Siena College poll. I'm sure you're aware of it. Trump 54, DeSantis 17. You're down at 2% there. I know that your polling in New Hampshire is certainly better. We're a week from tomorrow. We'll have the debate.
Yep.
What is your plan if President Trump isn't there?
It's no different than whether he is or isn't there.
God, by the way, can we just say how much of a... Look, I can understand Donald Trump not doing the debates in 2020 because he was the nominee, right? But he's not the nominee, or at least we don't know for sure that he's the nominee. That hasn't been confirmed yet. Him just sitting out of the debates, like he also like poo-pooed in 2016 as well when he started sitting out of the debates because he didn't like the moderator. That's like real pussy behavior. But everybody tried to make it sound like he was like a real G, like a real cool guy for doing that. This was pussy behavior. I really didn't like it. Honestly, also, Kyle Kulinski said something recently. I've been rewatching a lot of Kyle Kulinski content recently. I don't know why. And when I say watching a lot, I mean like 2 or 3 videos. That's a lot for a YouTuber for me. He said that he made a good case for me, and I think I agree with him, where it should be a law that the president or any nominee running for president should have to debate, should have to go on the debate stage and do a debate, that they should have to have their ideas challenged, that in a constitutional republic and a democracy, if you don't have your ideas challenged, then if you can't like engage with other people on these ideas, you're probably not fit for the highest office of the land. I think I could agree with that. I don't think that's a bad idea. Wouldn't that mean Biden is it? No, that would mean Biden would have to debate his Democratic primary opponents. And honestly, as much as I don't like RFK, the more spotlight that RFK gets, the less I think people will like him.